Isn't that it?
Yep.
I'll leave your board alone. Hello. So what we're going to do is talk about the podcast, where it's at, where it's going, and where it's been. That's pretty good.
That was a good intro.
I thought so.
That was very broadcastery. Hey, Ben.
I've enjoyed it, Jake.
It's been pretty fun.
Well, it's unique. I've run into some folks who've mentioned the podcast and are like, "Oh, I heard that episode," or I listened to that clip, and it's really cool. It's actually pretty special. It's so I gotta admit something. So we had Mitch Glazer on, and Mitch is the CEO of Emory Group Companies and just very successful. Done a great job in his career.
Very cool guy.
Yeah, real cool. But he talked about toward the end of the episode that I asked, what book does he recommend? And he's like, well, I don't really read that many books. He has, but he doesn't typically do that. So he didn't really, but he made a great recommendation. But I got to be honest, it felt good to hear him say that because guess what? I don't read books either.
Yeah.
And I had trouble in high school reading books because I got distracted. I just trying to focus on reading something I had zero interest in. If something I have interest in gets me, then I can start, but it's not my preference. And so the reason I mentioned books is because I've always been told that people who read books
are successful.
Yeah.
Or all successful people read books at least.
Well, and that they like them better than movies. And I think it's because they're able to get into it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I liken it to this podcast. Like I'm able to get into people's stories. This podcast is not about me, right? It's not about you. It's not. It's about the guest who comes in and to hear their stories, whether it's treasure hunting, hiking Mount Kilimanjaro, how veterans were treated in Vietnam. They just all have this beauty to them, and it's fun just to talk to people and listen. And it's been unique. So it's been a pretty cool experience. And we've got more guests coming in, more folks that have reached out, and I think one thing that's really cool, if I can just go off for a quick second.
No, spill.
If someone's got something to say and they're like, hey, I want to tell you some stuff, but I need to disguise my voice, I want them to know we can do that. Can we show them that feature?
Yeah,
like
sure.
It takes 2 seconds, right? So say somebody comes on and like, hey, I want to tell you something. Like, okay, go ahead and tell us.
Yeah, I got dirt on the Clintons.
You have what? Did you say you had? No, I got the dirt on the Clintons. Yeah.
So that's it, right?
Yeah.
So someone could really spill some. We could have like a whistleblower thing going on here, but anyhow, the podcast has been really, really special. Just meeting cool people and everyday people, not people with agendas, not multi-millionaire, billionaire people coming in here trying to reach a 10 million people audience. Because I don't
millionaire CEOs definitely haven't had any of those.
Zero. We have some thousandaires. But I mean, it's really cool, and I think if you listen to them, I can find something in every podcast where I'm like, wow, that was a really cool moment, So
yeah, for sure. You wanna do like a little progress report, like go through the episodes sequentially?
Yeah, I can do that.
Cool. All right.
Because I don't read, sequentially means
in order, chronologically.
Well, our first episode was just a kind of a kickoff what we're about, right? But the first one released was Ed Potts.
The first one was
Shelby McDaniel when she came in. Excuse me.
Yep.
But on YouTube, how it was released. But you're absolutely
we
right.
already talked about that on the 00 episode.
Well, okay.
We talked about who did we talk about? We talked about Shelby. We talked about. Well, we had done 3 episodes by then, right?
Maybe, but it won't take long to go through them.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Shelby came in and talked about, being a TikTok influencer, Instagram, and she works with Amazon she's a teacher. But what I liked about her episode, and I've had lots of feedback on hers, is she puts out a ton of content. So for people trying to be influencers, like she stays at it. And she said it's constant. You have to constantly put stuff out there. and create. And so it's not like just doing something once every 2 weeks or 3 weeks. I mean, she's constantly putting content out there, and she's been successful doing it. But that was really cool.
Yeah, every time I open our Instagram account, because we're following her, she's got a new skit on there, a new reel.
Yep.
And I'm like, holy crap, how do you, one, think of that many things, but two, like, video editing is not super easy.
No.
And, she's doing it from her phone, but still, like,
Yeah.
that's a big grind.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
But that's the people who are most successful seem to do that. They work hard. Let's see. Ed Potts came in here, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he's the nephew of Ray Kroc, founder of McDonald's.
Mm-hmm.
All the
One
people.
of my favorites.
Well, what's interesting is, so we did a clip on that, and we'll have more clips coming out on some of our initial episodes. But people, I saw comment, "Oh, he's not the initial founder. He's not the one. He stole it." Well, we have a clip about that, and Ray Kroc is his uncle, so he can tell you what he knows happened. Now, I know what the movie says, I know everything else says, but at the end of the deal, the McDonald brothers, and it's kind of crazy. That one bothers me a little bit, and I'll tell you why. You sell me a product that does okay, right? It's okay. I turned into incredible, but because my success is so big years later, look what I stole from you. At that moment, you can steal anything. And McDonald's brothers got what they paid, what they wanted, and he gave them every dime that they wanted. Was he
$1 million each, right?
Yeah, right. And was he a businessman? Sure, but that podcast there with Ed was really, really cool because he's also very involved with the Ronald McDonald House organization, and those folks never knew his relationship with McDonald's. He never put that out there, and so for him to come on here and share that with us was really, really cool.
That was the coolest part is, it's a really covered story because it's a big company. And we got details. Our little podcast got details that the movie and the book didn't get.
That's right. That's right.
Straight from the horse's mouth.
Well, the story, and this will be a clip, right? And we'll make the story about how here's this multi-millionaire guy, Ray Kroc, right? So Ed defends Ray, but then Ed can tell you where Ray was maybe not so kind to the family, where his grandfather's McDonald's store, one of the originals, when you look at how many there are now, flooded from the river, and he wouldn't give them a $25,000 loan. So that clip will be coming out soon. And Ray shares that. That wasn't in the movie. It's not in the books.
You mean Ed shares that?
I'm sorry. Ray won't be sharing it, but Ed will share it. So
he keeps it real.
He does. He does. Sonny Tillman. Sonny's. That was a really cool podcast. When Sonny came in, the man's 93 years old. He shares his life story, and he gets emotional because he lost his wife a few years ago, and just an incredible story about how just an ordinary guy created the #1 barbecue franchise in the United States of America in the 80s and 90s. And it's really cool in how they were really a pit boss, right? It wasn't just some packed up at Cisco warehouse brought in and put in an oven, right? They cooked it over, wood and really produced some really good stuff. And he shares some cool advice and secrets and things like that too.
It was interesting to me to hear how the change in product is mostly due to environmental regulations. Like they can't smoke their products like they used to because it's there's too much smoke emitted. That was interesting.
Contributing to global warming.
Yeah.
Sean Coles.
Cow farts. Yeah. Sean Coles.
Sean Coles. That was really good. He taught me a ton. Sean's a treasure hunter, right? And the Atosha, right? I think I called it the Atoka when he was on. And it's that was really cool, talking about the process of all this gold that's found off the coast of Florida that was, spanned. What do you call it? Royal, this King of Spain. It was their gold.
It was like half of their royal treasury or something.
Yeah, and how I'm like
10%, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm like, can people just go out there and find the boats and where it's at and try and get to it? He's like, yeah, but there's security, right? And then how not just security, but how the government got involved, how the United States government got involved, and Mel Fisher, who's the one who found it, had to fight. I want to say it went to the Supreme Court. So the story he shares, and he's of course had his own show on Discovery Channel, Treasure Hunter. It's really cool to see and meet folks. Once again, I'm just an ordinary dude. I think you're an ordinary guy as well. And these people are coming here sharing these stories that you're not hearing anywhere else, and getting deep into the details and nitty gritty about what it looks like and how it works. So, and he's still searching for some gold now, I think out in Utah. I think you mentioned Arizona.
I thought that the Sean Coles episode had a similar component to it that the Ed Potts episode had, insofar as the depth of the story being told. Sean Coles went on Discovery Channel, and he's been on a bunch of other TV programs and I think other podcasts, but he went super in depth on our podcast in long form. So, I'm sure we were able to scoop things that other mediums couldn't, just like the Ed Potts one. Yeah.
So one of the things about the Sean Coles one for me that I just absolutely loved was so I have, it's like the little kid in me wanting to treasure hunt, and he's talking, especially if you watch the episodes. If you watch Treasure Hunter, I got into it. Like, I watched every episode, and it's Indiana Jones like it in a modern world sense. His the history of things, the way they knew where things might be, talking to locals and how they created those relationships. So
the ethics of it all.
Yeah, and he talked, and that's something else that's interesting about different guests we've had. They've kind of all gone into this moral and ethical thing, and and the importance of, having respect. And you got to remember, we're not talking about just America here, right? You're talking Sean, who is in a whole other country doing these explorations, and it's, and then we speak to, and that's
Australian
later, the
lady.
Australian, yep, Lisa,
South African.
Oh, the South. So that's Sherilyn and Nancy, Mount Kilimanjaro, their hike. That one was a deep one. I felt that was probably the most. I don't put anyone in order of my favorites versus not favorite, but I'll put it in terms of
Like your children.
right. I can't do that. But getting into the story of Mount Kilimanjaro, no, nobody was falling off a cliff, right? Nobody broke a leg. But someone was flown off the mountain with, fluid on the brain.
It wasn't, the podcast wasn't about the mundane context. It was about deeper themes, I feel like.
Exactly, and that's what she talks about. That, and we actually separated that out into a clip about when Sherilyn gets to the top and she sees the sun rising and the emotions that overcame her. And the way she describes it basically is there's, 20, 30, 40, 50 people up there at the top. Right, and they have to get up at sunrise, because soon after sunrise the fog moves in and you can't see anything. And how she gets up there among all the people in the chaos and the 8-day journey to the top, and then in that moment everything went away and she was sort of just alone by herself.
Yeah.
And thinking about her insignificance,
right,
but significance in this world. So it was a really good one.
Yep.
I enjoyed
Very
Mount
cool.
Kilimanjaro a lot. And then you go on to, we had Damon come in the house. Damon's a friend.
Yep.
And just talk about anything and everything. That that podcast was all over the place, but it was a good one.
Yeah.
Well, that's what you want to do. You just sit back with some friends. I think sometimes you just want to. The one thing this podcast has done is you sort of get away from let's talk about the news. We get hit every single day with the news headlines and this and that. And it's always the same stuff, and it's always negative. And just to sit back and talk to people with cool stories. Some sad, some happy, some interesting, some maybe not so much. Everybody's different,
Yeah.
And I loved having Damon in here to talk about everything under the sun.
Yeah. I liked how there was just like zero pretentiousness in that. We were just all hanging.
Yeah.
And we, at least I definitely lost track of time, and I know Damon said he did too. And that was
it can happen when you're having fun.
right. Yeah. That was, even if the podcast episode actually sucks, I had enough fun.
Yeah.
That was good.
Well, Lisa came on. So Lisa's from Australia, and what I love about her, she's very opinionated. That's why I wanted her on here. She's got an incredible heart. She is just shares a really you know, if you just want perspective on life, if you want to know, you know, like I go back to the news, you talk about different countries, different people who, you know, the United States doesn't like or does like. I'll have enough people on this podcast by the time it's done that you'll go, wow, that was a cool person, and I thought people from that country weren't nice, right? In this case, Australia is kind of a sister country, and they're an ally of the United States. But still, having her on, bringing her unique perspective on different global type things was really cool. And the one from thing that stood out from that podcast was she was talking about a family member. I don't remember the country. It might have been Tasmania.
Was it Romania?
No, it's where people send and donate clothes to, but part of their economy there was making, clothing. And a bunch of things are donated from the Western world, trying to help. But what it actually did is, destabilize their economy. And so sometimes when you're donating and giving, it's like indigenous folks who live on islands still to this day, and they don't want your diseases. So you think it's cool and you fly your drone or you want to land on the island. They don't want your stuff. And so sometimes I thought what she was just trying to make a point is you got to be careful about when you give and what you give and how we give can really damage a country more so than help. So I thought that was cool. That's what I took away from that one.
Yeah. Okay. Who else do we have?
Forrest, Vietnam veteran.
Heavy one.
That was a heavy one. I got a lot of feedback on that one. Lots of people saying, hey, this was my favorite. And I think because a lot of Vietnam veterans don't talk about it, and I'll say this for the first time about that one. I don't think Forrest shared the whole story. Okay? And in my role here, I don't want to push someone to share more than they're willing to share. Right. Because especially with Vietnam, and especially with veterans, it was emotional. But I just know that there was more there that I've learned, and I can appreciate that he wasn't going to go there, and that's fine. But what he did share and being spit at, that was
the discrimination post-war, like coming home that he experienced after going through all of that. That was a surprise. I didn't know that happened.
Yeah.
I knew there was a huge anti-war sentiment or anti-Vietnam War sentiment going on during the war, but I had no clue that they actively discriminated against.
Well, how about when he came home that he
soldiers.
even went to VFW, which is Veteran Foreign Wars, and even they said that's not a real war.
Crazy.
Like that even was like even deeper. Like and so I'll tell you something. I've seen Lisa since that podcast came out, and since her podcast came out, where she Lisa from Australia, and she told me she watched the Forrest one, and she was a young girl in Australia at the time, and she remembers not being protesting anti-war in the sense of what we've come to know, like anti-war and you're criminals to the veterans. She did not want them to get hurt, so she didn't want them going off to war from Australia. She didn't want the young leaving, and so the young men and women or whoever was going over. And so when she stood on those sides protesting, it wasn't you're criminals. It was don't let them go die. Don't send them. And she said that it hit her very, very hard and differently when she watched this podcast because she saw Forrest not as the 70-something-year-old man he is today, but as a 21 or 19, 20-year-old boy. Yeah. And realizing, that she, and her intention was never to do that. She wasn't involved in like the bad stuff, but she protested in the sense of we don't want them to go off and get killed, to protect them. She cared about them. And so but that's not what you see in the news. You see two sides. You see the people who are fighting, and you see people who are going, don't do it, and, trying to say mean things and nasty things about our veterans. But that podcast right there is was really, really, really special.
Right.
So
I think even if he would have really gone into, the nitty-gritty horrible details, it still wouldn't have hit us. Like, to us, it's just a story. We can sort of for at least in my experience, when I hear things, when I hear like testaments of veterans, it gets filtered into my brain and it just turns into an action movie.
Right.
But
for them, it's something different.
But for him, it's a living story, and it's what's the point for cheap entertainment if having to relive something like that? I think you did a great job in not pushing there, because I think it would have been really gross if you were, actively trying to get the details.
I
So
think
I thought we did a good job there.
well, the goal, what I'm trying to accomplish here is bring folks who are interesting on, have a story to tell. Some don't offer to their story. Maybe I hear about it from somebody and I ask them to come on. But then once they're here, let them talk.
Yeah.
It's not about me.
Yeah. I
So-
really enjoyed that one.
So then we brought Carolyn Tate on, who's a nurse.
Also your stepmom, or not stepmom.
She's my mother-in-law. And I'll tell you what was interesting about Carolyn. So she's from Tennessee and she's been a nurse for over 40 years. And we just said, how's the business? And she said, it sucks. And it made me laugh because I know how difficult their jobs are, and they're overworked, and like anywhere else, they don't have enough people to work. And so, but she shares some really cool stories and some ones we don't need to get into that we've dissected a little bit. And, but getting into what nurses do day to day, what they have to run through, their challenges. And I'll tell you, I got a high level of respect for nurses. And I think I shared the story on that podcast that they have diagnosed some stuff just through me telling symptoms of things that I've seen before a doctor has been able to. Not that doctors aren't qualified, but a real RN, a really experienced RN is really important. So,
like her doing nursing for 40 years, I can't imagine the sort of like sixth sense she has for those things, like this
Right.
deep intuition after seeing so much.
she was cool to have on, and
Yeah, she was.
my wife and I just survived after it, so it was good, and she enjoyed it. So, then Coach Mack came in.
Wasn't there for that one.
Yeah, you weren't in the studio.
I was at the beach.
How was that?
It was all right. It was good.
So he went to the beach the week after, which is why he came in that week, because he couldn't come in the following week when you came back, because he's at the beach, and then he was going to be busy back in the school coaching. That one right there is a highly recommended listen for coaches at all levels, because he's been a head coach at public schools, at private schools, at big schools and small schools. He's won at a high level. He's had seasons that weren't great. He's coached boys basketball and girls basketball and football and track and field. He's been an athletic director and not coached anything. So he gets the whole picture.
Talked about parenting as well.
Yeah.
I listened to it.
Yeah. So parenting is very important, and it's difficult. And I've had and as you know, I used to coach, and I had a couple parents. It took me a while. But once I realized I'm not really getting paid a whole lot, and I'm spending my time to come up here and coach your kid. And so, I've gotten into it with a few parents in a professional way. And then it seems to work itself out. Nothing's personal, right? But you hear the parents can make up things in their head. Here, look, they have a kid coming home crying and upset. It's got to be the coach's fault, right? And I may have another coach coming on soon, not yet, but soon, that talked about this podcast, but how the parents taking their kids to other schools very quickly have sort of removed the bench option for coaches. So in the past, the bench was used as a motivator. And now when you put kids on the bench, they just transfer to another school.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not every kid. And some parents go, there's no way I would do that. And I am one of those parents who wouldn't do that, because I think I'll realize that if my kid's not playing a whole lot, it's probably because they're not going to ever play at the next level. But as long as they're working hard. And I think if you know a coach is just truly being unfair and nasty, that's different. That's different. But just because your kid doesn't get to play all the minutes, it's how the world works. You don't always get everything you want. And I think that's what Coach Mack's message is in this podcast, among other, reflections that he has.
Sure. Yeah.
And then Mitch Glazer.
Mitch Glazer.
Yeah, Mitch
Listen
came.
to some of that.
Yeah. So Mitch is, I could tell in the podcast he didn't want to get into it too much. The humble beginnings. Everybody has a poor story, but not everybody who has the poor story has sort of reached the levels of success that he has found. And it's very, very inspiring to listen to somebody talk about, living in a single wide mobile home in the center of Gainesville, Florida, 8 feet wide, 28 feet long, and finding hope. And I say that because I'm in the real estate business, and I ran into a customer recently who sort of made the comment, and they live in a home that's, it's not the nicest place, and it's very, very small, and there's not much value in it. I'm just being honest. And they looked at me and said, this is about all we're ever going to be able to get. And I thought to me how sad that is to feel that way. That's all I will ever be able to get is something like this. That no, you could do more. Like that person felt so uninspired. So I think Mitch's story of inspiring of, look, we lived this kind of life. And by the way, just because you live in a mobile home doesn't mean anything, because actually they make some really, really nice ones. But growing up the way he did and achieving the level of success he's achieved, and the way he talks about his family and how much he cares about his family. And when he talks about getting credit for stuff, like, hey, who did it? He is we, right? It's we. It's a team. A lot of great people helped. It wasn't. So I hope that noise isn't coming through. We got work being done. We got work being done on the building. But
Right.
Anyhow, Mitch was a great, great story, and a lot of lessons there, and we get a lot of clips out of that one.
I thought that one was really good for my generation because I think we're all worried that we're just going to get trapped in the wage cage. And he talked a lot about designing your own life.
Mm-hmm.
And that was cool. I don't think people realize that's an option.
Yeah. I
like that. part of it.
I think when you listen to that podcast, there's an opportunity there for personal growth. So I've just started a new book called The Untethered Soul.
Mm-hmm. Shout out Mickey Singer.
Yeah, and so
That's who I want on the podcast. So bad. Hey, Mickey Singer, if you're listening to this, please come on. Please, we'll pay you.
I'm gonna
Not that you need the money, but
I'm gonna finish this book and discuss it, and I hope I can get Mickey on. But I'll tell you,
let's have a book club.
that'd be cool.
Thing. Yeah.
You remember I don't read much, so for
Yeah.
me to pick up a book means something.
Sure.
I'm through the first chapter. I'm into the second chapter, and I think a lot of what Mitch talks about sort of touches on spirituality, talk about personal growth,
Isn't
challenges.
that so funny? All of our podcasts basically have talked about something much deeper. You mentioned it earlier, but spirituality has come up a lot, and we haven't had like spiritual gurus on.
Mm-mm.
We've just had a couple who climbed a mountain and business owners.
Yes,
Yeah,
and
that's super interesting.
it is interesting, and it's a deep subject. It really is. But Mitch's pod was really good, and there's a lot to be learned from that one. And you know what's crazy? It's not even if you're an entrepreneur. Anybody can pick something up out of what he was talking about and take it and turn it into something for good. And then the Chicago style blues singer came in, Mike Markowitz, Little Mike and the Tornadoes, and
Jammed out on the harmonica for a bit. That was
yeah,
awesome.
yeah, I enjoyed that, and he's he talked about the scene, and I'll be the first one to admit he mentioned a lot of artists that I'd never heard of. But if you look up on YouTube, they exist, and they were famous in their day. And he's very talented, and the music he plays is I've heard him many times at different places playing. It's very entertaining. It's very enjoyable. It's a different style of music, right? It's not your just country or R&B or something like that. It's really good. And so to have him come in and share his story, his life story, and the my favorite song, the one about his wife that he sings, that he wrote in New York, and it says nobody knows New York
Yeah.
like I do.
Yeah.
And so he was fun to have on as well. So it's been good. We've had a good lineup of people coming in, and it's only gonna grow,
Yeah. What are your personal takeaways? Like, what have you noticed anything about yourself? Have you realized that it's harder than you thought it would be, or easier, or more fun, or more work?
I don't know that it's more work. We have the equipment,
Mhm.
and there are more work to aspects of promoting the show, but or the podcast, because we try not to be a show. It's very informal. We're just talking. I think the part that I take away is, as it evolves, my first takeaway is I've removed myself.
Mm.
Right at the beginning, it was kind of like, oh, it's me, and I've got this podcast, and it's my show, but it's not really. It's the guest show. It's their show, and I help bring them along. And because of how our studio is set up, and I think you've got a bigger view today, a broader view of how it sort of looks in here, I think it really, it's not big and bright, with office people running around or windows like you'd see in a news studio, and you can see people. It's just us, and so it's sort of intimate, and it allows for a more pure, organic dialogue, if that makes sense.
Sure.
And I don't know. I feel like I've always tried to be objective and listen to people and not judge and try to understand where they're coming from and appreciate their time they're sharing with us. Sonny being 93 years old, or Shelly being in her 20s, her experiences versus his experiences, just listening to what they have to say and saying, what can I take from that and apply to my life? Because I think you can learn from anybody, whether they're older or younger, and that's another issue in this country, which is, some cultures, the older people are respected, and in this country, it's like the older people are like, "Oh, you're over the hill, you don't know what you're talking about," and that's playing out right now on TV because everybody wants to make fun of the president of the United States and him falling down and him stuttering. But good Lord, everybody's going to do that when they get old. It doesn't matter which political party you're a part of, but there's something that he can say, whether you like him or not, that maybe have some value.
And riding bikes are hard for anyone. I mean,
well, listen, okay, I've seen these videos. Oh, he fell down again, and I'm not getting into politics, right? Let's not do that. However, I've seen
getting into aerobics here.
I've seen singers falling down. People fall down all the time. I've tripped and fallen. Fell on some rocks with a camera in my hand, and the camera didn't break, by the way, okay? That's an inside story one of my family members can tell you about. But nonetheless, I just think we can have an appreciation for people and cultures. We can agree to disagree. And in this case, I'm allowing and wanting people just to share their stories and asking a few questions along the way to help the conversation and understanding. It's been good. It's been good. I'm humbled by it. I've enjoyed it,
Do you feel like your role is almost to be like a stage for the guests?
Yes.
Yeah.
I do. Yeah, this is the platform. Tell your story. And people love talking about themselves. And I don't mean that in like an egotistical way, but whoa, let me stop you right there.
But why?
I got to tell you about Bakari Realty.
What's a Bakari Realty?
We're a full-service real estate firm in North Central Florida working with buyers and sellers to buy and sell property.
North Central Florida? Is there a desert there?
No, there's no desert in North Central Florida. But there are a lot of people moving here from the desert and all over the country.
You think you can help me to move to Florida?
I've never sold anything to a cactus, but we can certainly try.
Okay, so I need to know how to get a hold of you.
Well, you can look at my phone number up. It's online. It's also on the bottom of the screen here, and I'll also give it to you, 386-462-5130.
Well, I'll do that. I just hope I don't stick you.
Everybody has a story.
Yeah.
And so I got a call from a friend this week, right? And he says, and I'm already thinking podcast. He goes, "Hey, I've had this lady walk in, and she's got this old historical document." I'm like, "Okay, what is it?" Send me a picture. And it says the Congress of the United States or something like that. And I'm trying to figure out what it is. What's the Bill of Rights? Okay. And so I'm thinking, and it's old, right?
Wait, she's got the...
Listen to me.
Are you saying the original copy?
Well, I didn't know at the time, right?
Okay.
But I'm like, is that really? And so I look at the picture and I start Googling and looking. And something that didn't make sense about it was it looked ink. You can see like an ink splotch on it and everything. But, printers can do that, for replica copies. But the bottom had like typed footnote type things in there. So I look up the original copy. Well, what I look up was, what was it? I figure, okay, it's the Bill of Rights. Then we look at what did the Bill of Rights, how many copies of there were there? There are 14 copies of the Bill of Rights. And of the 14 copies, a couple are missing. Well, this woman was from Pennsylvania, and her husband worked for a print place. And the copy of the Bill of Rights for the state of Pennsylvania is missing. So I'm thinking, does this woman have the Pennsylvania Bill of Rights?
Is that the one that Moses wrote?
I don't know. But all I know is in the end, she didn't have a copy, but she did have a replica that was probably at least potentially 150 to 200 years old, but it wasn't worth what it could have been if it was the real copy.
Yeah.
It was worth $200 maybe. I found one on eBay to look like it, but nonetheless,
could have been cool.
It'd been cool to have her on the podcast. I'm always looking for stories, and that's what the thing I want people like who know, if you listen and you're watching or hear this, if you know a story or know somebody that's got something to share that's really cool. And I'm not talking about how you went to a George Strait concert and fell on some steps and stood back
Mhm.
up. But I'm
Took
talking
a
about
funny
something,
pill. Yeah.
right? Put that on Instagram Reels. I'm talking about a story that's just kind of cool or unique that you find interesting, or a story to share. I'm game.
We need to get that lady with the
The aliens.
extraterrestrial story.
I'm working her. She's had some schedule conflicts, so we're working on that one.
2 months.
Yeah, it's been a while. Yeah, I'm working on it. My producer's supposed to do the scheduling, but that's a part of my job too.
Yeah, your producer doesn't know about anybody in this town, so
Well, you're doing a good job.
thank you.
Yeah. So, but anyhow, the podcast has been awesome to start, and I'm loving it, and I appreciate your help, and
Of course.
hopefully, and I appreciate all of our listeners and the folks that are subscribed. Please
guests.
subscribe, and offer any suggestions. Hey, we welcome it. We enjoyed it. So,
Is that all?
yeah, that's it.